So you join me back at the coast, Sheringham again, and this time I'm trying out a camera I picked up off eBay the other day, which is a Mamiya C330 TLR. So you obviously heard of SLRs, which is single lens reflex. TLR is twin lens reflex. So there's one lens which the viewfinder looks through, and the other lens is the one that actually takes the picture. So it's a slow process to use it. Lots of manual levers and knobs and dialing in. So I think it'll be interesting. It's not one to wander around just snapping away. First thing to do though, load some film into it. So I picked this up with two lenses. There is a 80mm, which is what's currently on it, and also a 135. But because this is medium format, the 35mm equivalent is wider than that. So I think on a normal 35mm camera, I've got the equivalent of around a 50 and around an 85 or so, I think. So loaded the film, and I might, just for the first picture, grab a quick view looking down here. Now the problem is there's no meter on this camera. Everything's completely manual, so I tend to use a phone app which tells me what settings to use. So the first thing is to grab that and see what we need to be using. So at f8 that reckons around 80th, 90th of a second in here. So try and get those settings dialed in on the camera. So both of those are dialed in on the front here. So the front lever lets us set the aperture. So set that to about f8. And then we set the shutter speed on the rear dial. So we can choose between a 60th and 125th. So I'm probably going to go for 60th and then up the aperture a little bit more just to get some more depth of field. So I did run a slow test roll through this. It came with a fairly expired roll of film just to make sure it worked. And it did become apparent that slow shutter speeds and handheld with that isn't great. So I think I'm going to pop it on the tripod here just to avoid any camera shake. So the next thing, and to do that, we lift up the top and then peer down inside it. And there's also a magnifier just to aid focusing. The way you actually focus is with this wheel, and you'll spot it uses bellows focusing like the picture for speed cameras at the side of the road. Right, so finally got the shot all lined up and in focus, hopefully. That's all that remains is to take the picture. It didn't work, and that's because there's also a shutter lock button that needs to be released. It worked that time. Right, wind on and then start to find some more shots. Don't worry, I'm not going to talk you through the entire shooting process for every single picture because that will rapidly become quite dull. I hope you can hear me because it's actually quite windy up here on the cliff top. Anyway, one thing I also should mention about the use of a TLR like this is that because the upper lens is obviously offset from the lower lens, because physics, it means when you're composing your shot, the image you'll take is actually sort of 5 or 6 centimetres lower down. So for a lot of images that doesn't really matter, but once you start getting close up, it becomes a little trickier. And in that viewfinder where you look down the top, there's a little line that sort of moves up and down as you focus in and out. And what that does is shows essentially the top of the frame that the camera will actually take the picture of. So if that little red line has dropped halfway down the viewfinder, you sort of need to recompose so that the top of your shot is where that line is. Hopefully that makes sense. The other thing apparently with bellows focusing is that as you focus closer, which is the bellows moving out, it reduces the amount of light coming in. So it's not the same as a normal camera lens. So you also need to add some exposure compensation. So I don't know if I'll do any close-up shots today, so that may or may not be a problem. But if I do, it's one to bear in mind. Sort of need a wee, but the toilets are closed while they're doing building work. That's a good excuse to stop for a cup of tea somewhere. So over that way we've got the start of the beach huts, and down that way is the lifeboat station. There's not a lot more down that way, so I might go down there first. Completely as an aside, I was meant to be off to Romania next weekend, but I'm still recovering from a bout of pneumonia, so I'm still popping antibiotics into myself, but I'm feeling much better at the moment, hence getting some fresh sea air today. But yeah, I've moved that trip out a month, so that won't be until later in April now. Anyway, you might have seen when I loaded the film, I popped in some Porta Potty 160. I've used 400 before on my 35mm camera and quite liked the sort of desaturated tone, so I thought it was a bright sunny day like this, it seems a good excuse to use the slower film with finer grain. Spotting here, turn around, too far. Quite like this little red door with the Tidal Wave Cafe sign above it, so I might set up a little shot here. So I think I'm going to grab a little image looking along the cliffs here because the light's quite nice. And there's one of those sort of wooden groins in the semi-foreground and a nice sort of line of shingle where it meets the sand. So hopefully that'll come out okay. I just need to avoid including the people jumping up and down for a photo closer to the cliff, but I think that should be okay. I'm not going to walk any further down this slipway because it's covered in seaweed and it's slippy. It's like ice. Horrible stuff. Right. I'm going to use the tripod here as well because handheld composing with this camera is a bit tricky. It's very sensitive to angles. Right, had a nice coffee and a tea cake and a wee, so that's all the important things done. So I'm just going to carry on walking along the front now. I've just spotted these little boats up the end here poking out from the building, which I think could work. So complicated one to meter this because there's a lot of shadow and then the building in the distance is in sunlight, so I think I'm going to meter for the shadows, which is kind of the opposite you do with digital. But yeah, film has fairly good latitude, but doesn't like being underexposed. So I think, yeah, go for the shadows. Right, I'll switch to the other lens I've got, the 135, just for one or two detail shots of fishing baskets and periscopes. Telescopes. So I think according to the little dial on the side of the camera, I've got one shot left. So hunt something out for that and then we're kind of done. Well, I reckon for the last shot, hopefully you can hear me. I'm up on top of the cliff and it's windy. I think I'll take a view looking over there. It's quite nice. It's a nice light and shadows down on the shore from the ridges in the cliffs. Oh, blowy. So I'm going to stick the wider 80mm lens back on for this one, which shouldn't let me encompass enough of the scene, but enough talking to you. Get the camera back out. Right, I think that was probably the last shot. There might be one more. It didn't keep winding, so I think possibly there's one more. Either way, that's probably it for this video. So I now have to wait for those to get developed and sent back to me, because I don't develop colour at home yet, only black and white. So I guess by the time you watch this, it's going to be a week or two from now. Either way, I hope you enjoy the pictures if they come out. And yeah, if you enjoyed it, give the video a little like and subscribe and all that. And otherwise, I shall see you again fairly soon with a bit of luck.